I am 85 years old now and my hands shake when I hold a glass of water. Not because I am weak, but because my body remembers too much. It remembers things I wish it would forget. The smell of disinfectant in hospital corridors, the sound of doors slamming, the bitter taste of alcohol that once burned my throat and then ruled my life. The night everything finally collapsed, I was sitting alone in a dark bar, my head resting on the sticky wooden counter. My wife Margaret was at home packing her bags. I didn't know that yet. I was too busy arguing with a bartender half my age, slurring my words, insisting I was fine. That night my son stopped answering my calls. That night my daughter sent a message I would never forget: "Dad, don't come home. Mom can't take this anymore." That was the moment my family slipped through my fingers. And the cruelest part, I had spent my entire career protecting secrets, serving my country, believing I was strong enough to control anything, including myself. I was wrong. Let me take you back. My name is Julius. I was a civil servant tied to the CIA for over 3 decades. I wasn't a spy in movies with guns and explosions. I was the man behind the desk, the one who read reports, made calls, and carried burdens that couldn't be shared at dinner tables. I married Margaret when I was 32. She was calm where I was restless, gentle where I was guarded. She wanted a peaceful family life. I wanted silence and control. At first, we were good, not perfect, but good. We had 2 children, Daniel and Rebecca. I worked long hours, came home tired, but I was present enough to fool myself into thinking everything was fine. When arguments started, they were small: money, time, me not listening. I told myself all couples fought. The first time I walked into a bar after a fight with Margaret, it felt harmless. One drink to cool my head, one drink to avoid saying something cruel at home. That one drink became two, two became a habit, and habits become chains before you realize your hands are tied. A few minutes into this story, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? The living room? Your car? Somewhere quiet where no one knows your struggles? Drop it in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. I never came home drunk in the early years. I was careful, controlled, or so I believed. Margaret noticed before I did. She noticed how quickly I left the house after disagreements, how late I returned, how my breath smelled like excuses. She asked me to stop. I promised I would. I always promised. What I didn't see was how my children were watching. Daniel stopped inviting friends over. Rebecca stopped telling me about school. Silence filled the house, thick and heavy. When I was sober, I felt it. When I wasn't, I didn't care. The bar became my hiding place. It didn't judge me. It didn't expect apologies. It didn't ask me to be emotionally present. I told myself I deserved that escape after a lifetime of service. That lie became my favorite drink. The real betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from inside my own home and from inside myself. One evening, after a particularly vicious argument with Margaret, I didn't even pretend to cool down. I grabbed my coat and left. When I came back hours later, the house was dark. Too dark. No lamp by the couch, no hallway light. I found a note on the kitchen table. "We're at my sister, we need space." I laughed, a bitter, arrogant laugh. Space. I had handled classified crises. Space didn't scare me. I poured another drink and sat alone, convinced they would come back once they calmed down. Days passed, then weeks. Margaret stopped answering my calls. Daniel blocked my number. Rebecca sent short, cold texts. I told myself they were being dramatic, that I would fix it later, but later never came. What I didn't know was that someone had been whispering into Margaret's ear. Her sister, Elaine. Elaine had never liked me. She said I was distant, cold, dangerous. She used my drinking as proof that I was a lost cause. She encouraged Margaret to protect the children, to prepare for life without me. Elaine didn't want reconciliation. She wanted control. And while she was planting fear, I was planting regret. The night of the final confrontation came without warning. I stumbled home from the bar to find Margaret standing in the living room, fully dressed, eyes red but dry. That scared me more than tears ever could. She handed me divorce papers with hands that didn't shake. "I can't save you," she said quietly, "and I won't let you drown us with you." I wanted to argue, to beg, to promise change, but my mouth tasted like alcohol and cowardice. All the words I had practiced in my head fell apart. I watched her walk out, and for the first time in my life I felt truly powerless. The next morning, I woke up on the floor, my head pounding, my phone filled with missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. One voicemail stood out. A calm, unfamiliar voice said, "Mr. Julius, this is regarding a matter involving your family. Please call us back immediately." My heart sank. I thought I had already lost everything. I didn't know that the worst betrayal and the truth that would finally break me was just beginning. I stared at my phone for a long time before calling back that unfamiliar number. My hands were trembling not from age alone but from fear. In my career, calls like that usually meant trouble, documents, investigations, consequences. But this time it wasn't about my job, it was about my family, and somehow that felt worse. The voice on the other end belonged to a social worker. She spoke slowly, carefully, like someone walking through broken glass. She told me Margaret had filed a formal report not against me as a criminal, but as an unfit emotional presence in the home due to alcohol abuse. My sister-in-law Elaine had supported it with written statements. Statements describing me as unstable, aggressive, unreliable. Aggressive. That word hit me like a slap. I had never laid a hand on my wife or children. Never. But in black and white, my absence, my drinking, my silence had been translated into something far uglier. And the worst part was this: on paper, it looked convincing. I hung up and sat there, staring at the wall, replaying memories I had avoided for years. The times Daniel waited by the window for me to come home sober. The times Rebecca flinched when I raised my voice, even if it was just frustration, not anger. I told myself I was a good man who made bad choices, but what if to them I was just a bad man? Margaret refused to see me at first. When she finally agreed, it was at a small cafe, public, neutral, safe. She looked older, not from age but from carrying too much alone. She didn't yell, that hurt more than shouting ever could. "I begged you, Julius," she said softly. "I begged you to stay to talk. To fight for us instead of running to that bar." I tried to explain about stress, about habits, about how I never meant for it to get so bad. She listened, but her eyes stayed guarded. "Elaine says you'll never change," she added quietly, "and sometimes I think she might be right." That was the moment I realized Elaine wasn't just a background voice. She was steering the wheel. She controlled where Margaret stayed, who advised her what stories were repeated until they sounded like truth. My children wouldn't meet me at all. Daniel sent a message saying he needed peace. Rebecca wrote that she loved me but didn't trust me. Trust, a word I had protected for my country but failed to protect at home. I tried to stop drinking on my own, cold turkey. Pride told me I didn't need help. Pride nearly killed me. The shakes, the sweats, the nights staring at the ceiling, reliving every mistake. I ended up in the emergency room after collapsing alone in my kitchen. No wife, no children, just a nurse calling my name. That was my lowest point. In that hospital bed, stripped of my illusion of control, I finally admitted what I had avoided for years. Alcohol wasn't my escape. It was my enemy, and I had let it win. Rehab was humiliating at first, sitting in a circle with people half my age admitting weakness, but it was also honest. For the first time, I spoke without hiding behind a career or authority. I talked about fear, about silence, about how bars felt safer than my own home because they didn't expect me to feel. Weeks passed, I got stronger, clearer, sober. When I reached out to Margaret again, I didn't beg this time. I apologized fully, no excuses, no but, just truth. She listened, she cried, she didn't promise anything. Then came the twist I didn't expect. A counselor pulled me aside one afternoon and asked if I knew about the messages Elaine had been sending Margaret from a number saved under my name. Messages that looked like drunken threats. Messages saying I didn't care if they left. Messages I had never sent. My stomach dropped. Elaine had crossed a line. She hadn't just warned Margaret, she had manipulated her, lied, forged words in my voice to push her away from me completely. I felt rage rise in my chest, hot and dangerous, but for the first time I didn't run to a bar. I sat with it, breathed through it, planned carefully. Because the next confrontation wouldn't be fueled by alcohol. It would be fueled by truth. And I knew one thing for certain: if I didn't expose the lies now, I would lose my family forever. Before the next chapter begins, let me ask you, what would you have done if you discovered someone was secretly turning your family against you? Have you ever seen manipulation like this destroy a home? Share your thoughts in the comments. I didn't confront Elaine right away. Old habits told me to rush in, to demand answers, to force the truth out with authority. New habits, hard-earned ones, told me to slow down. Truth, I had learned, is strongest when it's patient. I asked the counselor for help gathering everything: phone records, Message timestamps, screenshots from Margaret's phone, it was all there, ugly and undeniable. Messages sent at hours when I was in rehab sessions. Misspellings I never used, a cruelty that didn't sound like me but had worn my name like a mask. Seeing those messages broke something inside me. Not because they were fake, but because they sounded like the man my family already believed I was. That realization hurt more than the lies themselves. Margaret finally agreed to meet again, this time at the counselor's office. Neutral ground, safe ground. She walked in stiff, guarded like someone preparing for bad news. Elaine wasn't there, that was intentional. I didn't start with accusations, I started with ownership. I failed you, I said. I failed our children. I chose alcohol over communication and I gave fear room to grow in this family. That part is mine. Her eyes softened just slightly. But there's something you need to see, I continued, sliding the folder across the table. She flipped through slowly, her hands began to shake. When she reached the printed screenshots, her breath caught. She stared at one message for a long time. I remember this, she whispered. You sent this the night before we left. I was already in rehab, I said gently. They can confirm it. Silence filled the room, heavy and fragile. The counselor explained calmly about number spoofing apps, about patterns, about how manipulation often hides behind concern. Margaret covered her mouth as the truth settled in. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not loud or dramatic, just devastated. Elaine said she was protecting us, she said. She said you were dangerous. I nodded. I was unhealthy, I was absent, but I was never what she made me out to be. That was the moment the story cracked open. Margaret didn't rush back to me, healing doesn't work like that. But something important changed, doubt shifted away from me and toward the person who had been whispering poison into our lives. Elaine didn't take the exposure well. When Margaret confronted her, she denied everything at first, then she cried, then she raged. She accused me of manipulation, of staging evidence, of playing the victim. But the facts didn't bend for her feelings. Daniel agreed to meet me after that, just us, no mother, no aunt. He looked older than his years, tired in a way only disappointed children get. I didn't hate you, he said quietly, I just didn't trust you. I told him the truth, not just about Elaine, but about my addiction, about fear, about weakness, about how running to bars had been easier than facing myself. I'm sober now, I said, but sobriety doesn't erase damage, I know that. He nodded, I need time. Rebecca was harder, she cried the whole meeting, said she loved me but felt abandoned for years. I didn't defend myself, I listened, every word was a consequence I had earned. Slowly, painfully, we began rebuilding, not as a perfect family but as an honest one. Margaret set boundaries, real ones, no moving back in yet, continued therapy, complete transparency. I agreed to all of it without argument. For the first time, I wasn't trying to control the outcome, I was trying to deserve a chance. And then another twist came, one I didn't expect. Elaine had been borrowing money from Margaret for years, secretly, feeding her own failing marriage, her own resentment. My family's collapse hadn't just been about concern, it had been about power and jealousy. When that truth came out, Margaret cut ties completely. That night, alone in my small apartment, I realized something sobering. Alcohol hadn't ruined my family by itself. My refusal to face pain had. And now, standing in the wreckage, sober and exposed, I knew the final test wasn't about winning anyone back. It was about whether I could live differently, even if forgiveness never fully came. Before we move forward, let me ask you, have you ever discovered that someone close to you was manipulating the truth behind your back? What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments. I live alone now in a small, quiet apartment not far from the old family house. At 85, silence can either be a gift or a punishment. For years, I feared it, drowned it in noise and alcohol. Now I sit with it, I listen to it. It tells me the truth without shouting. Margaret never moved back in. That was one of the hardest things I had to accept. Not because I didn't love her, but because I finally understood something important. Forgiveness does not always mean restoration. Sometimes it simply means release. We meet once a week for coffee, sometimes we talk about the children, sometimes we talk about therapy, sometimes we talk about nothing at all. There is warmth, but there is also distance, and that distance is a boundary she earned the right to set. Daniel visits me every other Sunday. He brings his own kids now, my grandchildren. The first time they ran into my arms, laughing, something inside me cracked open in a good way. I cried that night not from guilt but from gratitude. I was still allowed to be part of something. Rebecca calls me almost every evening. She asks about my health, reminds me to take my medication, scolds me gently when I forget. Sometimes she tells me about her day. Sometimes she just listens while I talk about mine. Trust didn't come back all at once. It returned in small, careful steps, like someone testing ice before walking fully across it. Elaine is no longer part of our lives. Cutting her off wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, firm, final. Margaret learned painfully that love mixed with control is not love at all, and I learned that silence in the face of manipulation can be just as destructive as shouting. I still attend recovery meetings. People are often surprised to see an old man there talking about addiction like it's a current battle, but addiction doesn't retire just because you do. It waits, it watches, and it whispers when you think you're strong enough to listen again. There are nights when the urge still comes, when loneliness taps me on the shoulder and suggests one drink won't hurt, when memories of my failures feel too heavy to carry sober. On those nights, I do something different now. I pick up the phone. I call my sponsor, I call my daughter. Sometimes I just sit with the feeling until it passes. Discomfort no longer scares me, running from it once cost me almost everything. I've spent a lifetime serving my country, believing duty meant endurance, silence, and control. But the greatest lesson came after retirement, after loss, after humiliation. Strength isn't in how much pain you can hide, it's in how honestly you face it. If I could speak to my younger self, the man who walked into bars instead of his own living room, I would tell him this: your family doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. They need your ears more than your pride, your vulnerability more than your authority. And to the younger ones listening now, here is my advice, sage advice earned the hard way. Don't numb pain you haven't named. Don't let outsiders define your story while you stay silent. Don't wait for rock bottom to prove you need help, and above all, don't confuse escape with peace. Peace is built slowly with honesty and accountability. I am 85 years old. I can't rewrite my past, but I can live the rest of my life awake, sober, responsible for my choices. That is my redemption. Have you ever watched alcohol, silence, or manipulation slowly tear a family apart? What would you have done differently if you were in my place? And what lesson are you taking from this story? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments.